Thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to Pivot and Thrive. I'm Karen McCarthy, founder of Vermont Collaborative Circle and host of the Pivot and Thrive community. We're guided by a mission of supporting small businesses so that Vermont can be a place where businesses and families thrive. We have learning, sharing, collaboration, and market opportunities that we bring together to support small business success. I'm really excited that you're here. Thank you for joining us today for this Pivot and Thrive interview, where we showcase business owners who are demonstrating creativity, collaboration, and resilience. And today we're joined by Jen Peterson of Yoga Grace. I'm really excited to have you here today on the call, Jen. And before get started, I want to acknowledge the Abenaki people on whose land we're coming together to have this discussion and recognize them as the past, present, and future caretakers of this land. Thank you. Without further ado, Jen, thank you so much for joining us today. It is such a pleasure to have you. I'll let you know I have had the pleasure of participating in Jen's yoga sessions and have collaborated with her in the past to host events, and she's just lovely to work with. But I'm so excited for the opportunity to hear Jen's story and help share it with all of you. So Jen, without further ado, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and Yoga Grace?
Yeah, thanks, Karen. I'm really happy to be here too. So my name is Jen Peterson and my business is Yoga Grace. It's my dharma, my heart's calling to share yoga. It took me till I was 50 to figure that out, what I was supposed to be when I grow up. But I did it. I took the plunge and became an entrepreneur in 2017, which actually was the year that I turned 50. So I feel like it was one of those moments. And so my business is teaching yoga, and I do that through group classes and a private practice of seeing clients one-to-one. I also do other collaborations, workshops, and workplace yoga as well. Sort of, I have mats will travel.
That's a good approach. That's a good approach to have. Can you talk to us a little bit about your practice? You said you do one-on-one yoga. How is it different than what people might have in their mind of a yoga class? What's your approach?
Yeah, so you can come for a one-to-one session for a number of different reasons. And if you look back at sort of the history of yoga, it started with people having one teacher that they actually would study with one-to-one, and the sort of intention and the belief being that you need to design the yoga practice and the yoga journey that's right for you and what you need at whatever given time in life. And so I definitely feel that that's true, that, group classes are great. I'm not knocking group classes, but when you can really get one-to-one support and develop your own practice, that's where the real magic can happen with yoga. And just, practically or generally, people come to me to establish a practice or to deepen their practice, but it's also great for therapeutic support. If you have an injury that you're recovering from, it's phenomenal for supporting people with anxiety and depression. And so there's a lot of different reasons that people can come for support. And that's my favorite part of the work that I do, is the one-to-one sessions.
That's great. And I'm sure that so much of this is about building a relationship or finding a connection with the people that you're working with. Can you talk a little bit about how you go about that, or what does it feel like to be in a personalized yoga session?
Sure. Well, right now it feels like looking at each other on Zoom like we do now. But when people come to me, I just start by asking them what brought them to try it, like what inspired them, what their yoga experience is, what they're hoping to. And then we go from there. I'll share about the style of yoga that I teach, and maybe have them talk about if they do have some issues going on, and do some kind of more visual assessment in terms of what range of motion is, where there might be some sticking points or pain. And then we we try some things within that time that we're together and see what feels good and what feels like it could be helpful. And then I'll design a practice for them to try, and together we'll decide how often they want to come back and sort of have me be their guide and support for them along that way.
Well, it sounds like communication is key, as with any good relationship. So it's great to hear you're able to connect with people and hear what their interest or what it is that brings them to resolve in your practice. You alluded to this a little bit, but can you talk about how things have changed for you this year?
Yeah. Yeah. So before, I have a little studio in my home where I am right now, and that's where I see people. It's not big enough for group classes. So I was teaching at other studios, about 3 other studios, a few times a week, and then seeing people here. And obviously, March shut that all down, March 2020 shut that all down. And so luckily, I had a website, I had an online scheduler. And so that really made it easy for me. That integrated with Zoom. And so it made it easier for me than I think it was for some of my colleagues to switch to an online platform. So I started pretty much right away offering group classes online and doing one-to-one sessions online. It took a little while for people to be willing to do one-to-one sessions online. I think they weren't really sure like how personal and much support I could offer. So, and I was curious about that too, but I feel like it's worked really well. And then I think that the part about that then that changed is all of a sudden the geographic boundaries of who I was connecting with and teaching with changed too, right? So I've had people from France and Ireland and Montreal join my classes. I'm working one-to-one with a woman in Baltimore and a woman in California. And so sort of my wings have spread well beyond kind of the Vermont borders for my business, which has been really fun.
That's fantastic. That's exciting. Can
Yeah.
can you talk a little bit about how you learned how to do your practice in an online setting? What was the transition that you needed to go through in terms of how you offered your work, or how you thought about sharing your skills in a virtual setting?
Right. I think for the one-to-ones, it was making sure that folks felt comfortable using the technology, right? And I do have older clients that I work with. So I have one woman who I see a couple times a week, and I have to call her on the phone, and then she clicks the button, and then I ask her to unmute, and then I ask her to start her video, right? And then getting them to position it so I can actually see them. So that's a little bit, but once we get that going, it can still feel really personal, right? I know that you all know, like, we're working with Zoom and we're finding ways to feel deeper connection, even though it's like on a screen. And it feels really critical to do, right? To see people face to face, even if we can't like tangibly touch them. And I would say, so the one-to-ones, I think it's working well. The classes, so yoga teachers, when they first become yoga teachers, we have to like practice again and again not to demonstrate while we're teaching, because you want to hold the space for people and you want to be able to see them and support them and guide them. Even though you're in a big group, you can't give them as much one-to-one support, but with Zoom, you kind of have to do more demonstrating, and I am older, I guess, so my eyesight isn't that great. So this sort of watching people on little screens and, staying in a pose that I feel like demonstrates a little bit of integrity. Not that I want people to like 100% mimic me, right? Because that's the other part of not demonstrating, is then they get to feel it in their bodies versus like look at somebody and say, that's what I should look like in my pose, when I do it, even though we have totally different bodies and different levels of experience. And so I would say that's the more challenging part for me.
That's really interesting, because I had never thought of it in terms of maybe feeling competitive or being competitive, but sometimes it can get into that headspace of comparing oneself with another in the class or with the instructor, and so that's really interesting to offer the online setting as a way, and also one-on-one as a way to remove that added tension or stress within the class environment. That's really interesting.
I know. I think we think about like, oh, yoga's not competitive, right? It's about like sort of centering in yourself and everything. But, we're human beings. And I think, the reason that the most common reason I hear people say, I don't do yoga because I'm not flexible or strong enough, right? And that's a comparison right there. How there's some level of flexibility and strength that you have to do yoga, which is just bullshit, frankly, but sorry. But
No, it's good. I want us to be real here. So that's fantastic. And that's great. Can you there's been such a transformation in how we come together, how we operate as business owners, as individuals, as people, community members. Can you talk about that transformation for you? It can feel unsettling or off-centering. Can you talk about how you have stayed connected to your sense of self and purpose through this time?
Sure. I feel like there's a lot in that question. It happened very shortly after I became a business owner, and I have spent prior to that 25 years working for nonprofit organizations, right? So I was always part of a team, and I held senior leadership positions, but decisions were made together, right? With sort of collaboration and like, I don't know, it feels different than sort of being out there on your own and then really being out there on your own, like, okay, what do I do next? It's been a challenge all the way along for me to come into that place of like, okay, I'm the one that makes the decisions and I just have to make the decision. There's nobody, really to like, I have built networks, right? And actually, I think the like Vermont Collaborative Circle and the other networks that are out there has made it easier for me to connect, because it's not like I have to block off the time, because I live in Bristol. A lot of stuff happens up in the Burlington area. So it was like block off the time to drive and then be at the meeting. And so that way the technology and the sort of more computer technological connection has been really helpful to build more collegial relationships. I also have received some coaching support just because I needed somebody to really like intimately bounce ideas off of. And so I was lucky enough to find 2 coaches who trade yoga sessions with me for some coaching support. And
fantastic.
It's been really, really, really helpful.
That's great.
Yeah.
I think you touched just in that brief discussion of how you've supported your transition. You touched on 2 things that I think are so fundamentally important to us as individuals and to our communities. And that is creating a network to support your success and to share those ideas. And also having coaches and sounding boards on people that you resonate with, who can help you to hear your ideas in another perspective, or you hear them back, reflected back to you, can be such a powerful tool for helping to move yourself forward, your business forward, set priorities, and support yourself with accountability. And so I'm really glad that you were able to find resources to help with that. Keep that sense of groundedness.
Right. And I'm lucky to also be in a field that like offers me a ton of tools to be grounded, right? To just practice getting centered and settled in myself. And that's obviously been the baseline lifesaver for keeping it together.
Yeah. Can you talk about maybe some of your mentors or who's inspiring you in your field, or maybe your inspiration isn't necessarily in the yoga practice, but what's helping you to find that sense of inspiration?
Sure. Well, that's the other great thing about this transition, right? It's not great, but there's silver linings, right? There's gifts that you have to find in the disruption that's happened. And my teacher that I'm studying with now, so I'm in the middle of getting my certification in yoga therapy. I'm halfway there. And he's in California. And the only time I was seeing him was for like these great immersions that I was doing in Texas with a bunch of other people twice a year. But he started doing online classes and online sanghas, right? So sangha is a Sanskrit word for community, right? So you'd come together with other people who are practitioners and teachers and just share what's going on. So luckily I've been able to find that. And he's been talking every single time we get together about, you have to remember that this is a practice, right? So there's no magic bullet for any of the stuff that's happening in the world right now. There's, we could talk a lot about, social justice and the long, long road that we're on and how uncomfortable that is and how we have to be on it, but also just in our daily lives and the fatigue that we're facing and the isolation that we're facing and the fear that we're facing, that you have to keep consistently and patiently practicing with yourself and remembering that, the days that you aren't getting on your mat are the days that are part of your practice as well, right? There's lessons to be learned in all of it, and noticing when you don't get on your mat, what that feels like versus when you do get on your mat. And so that's been lately a big inspiration to me, to remember it's about practice. It's not, I'm going to take a pill and feel better, or I'm going to fix myself and feel better, right? It's a journey, an endless journey for the time that I get to be in this body, in this lifetime. So yeah, practice. I heard there's a woman, Brooke Thomas, and she has another community called Liberated Being, which is wonderful too, if anybody has any interest in sort of getting together with people who are really thinking about how do we live an embodied life? So how do we live fully into our lives? And she said, if you think about being like a tomato, right? A tomato doesn't just grow, right? You have to water it. You have to plant the seed in the soil. You have to, make sure the soil has nutrients in it. You have to give it sunshine, right? So that's kind of what practice is. It's like helping us. It's like we're a tomato and we're growing with the practice, with the, yeah. So
what a good reminder. And I'm thinking not only of, the water and the soil, but also like the support string or the cage for the tomato. Sometimes having those structures help us to grow, and whether it's having a practice that you or practice or community that you lean back on, I think is so important in being able to set down roots that are really strong and firm and well planted. So what a great analogy. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little? Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, it reminds me of also the idea that I've been thinking about a lot, especially with the whole Black Lives Matter sort of getting reinvigorated in this last year, that the whole, system of yoga philosophy is about sort of, you tend to yourself, but then that allows you to tend to your community, right? And so we have a responsibility to be out in our community and giving back to others and supporting others. And so that's been also a really important part of my practice, is to go back to those roots and that philosophy and that learning, so that I can come and sit and be uncomfortable as a white person, coming to grips with, what we've been ignoring for a long time about how a lot of people are having to live in this world without those support networks that, like the tomato, encasements and everything. There's a lot of people out there that don't get that.
Yeah, certainly equity is an issue that I think is coming up more and more. And if we keep with this metaphor, and making sure that we're creating environments where we're cultivating with intention, and that we're, not just planting seeds and ignoring them, but creating the spaces where people can grow to their full potential. And we're not all starting in the same place. So that you're using yoga to build that awareness in yourself so that you can show up in support of others that's really interesting. Do you have a network or resources that you're tapping into to inspire you in that work, or help you with the accountability of that work? I mean, it's work. It's hard to challenge and question yourself, but it is, as you said, the practice is valuable. So how do you keep yourself in that mindset?
I feel really lucky because I connected with Rachel DeSimone, who is a yoga teacher, and she teaches at a couple of studios, including Evolution. And she and her partner put together a racial healing weekend for folks to come together. This was in the summer, and to talk about it. And so she shared a lot of resources to look at and read and think about. And then we decided to keep meeting. So we're meeting every other week, and it's really to create that space to learn together, but also to be able to kind of talk about recognizing where we still continue to live in our privilege obliviously, and to be able to sort of get a little naked about that and raw and process that. And so that's been really helpful to like find a safe space. I don't like that I just said safe space, because there's so many people not living in safe space, but a place to process all of it and to try and become better without sort of burdening people of color and Black folks with having to train us and help us be better, right? So.
Right. Unpack our baggage
Yes,
on our own time, like do the work and feel it in our body. Where is it that we're holding discomfort, or why
yes,
is it that we're tense
yes,
when certain topics come up? And using
right.
yoga to have that awareness, I think, is really powerful.
Yeah,
Are you able to talk a little bit about, I mean, yoga is an India, or is an Indian East Asian practice.
yeah,
Can you talk about, kind of how yoga has maybe been commodified in the West or North American
yeah,
practice, and
yeah,
what that means for the practice of yoga?
yeah. Yeah, sure. So I think I'm continuously trying to be open to learning how I still practice sort of in a way that's been colonized and may feel not supportive of recognizing where this tradition comes from. I think it certainly has been sort of fitnessized just over the years too, so that it's lost a lot of what makes it actually really powerful in terms of the practices that are more contemplative and thoughtful, that it's just become about poses and being able to do poses really well. And I think, social media, unfortunately, continues to manifest that in terms of like what we see when we see pictures of people doing yoga, and what their bodies should be looking like. So I think there's that component of it. And then there's also the fact that, yeah, it was brought over, and the lineages of it, and culturally appropriated. Even so even the word namaste, which is, way back in its roots, a very broadly defined term in terms of recognizing the true nature of each other, right? But in common day India, namaste just means hello, right? But at the end of a lot of yoga classes, there's a lot of namaste. And so, just little things like that and becoming more aware of that, I think is important to be mindful of. And so, I'm definitely, and I also think it's, there's so much to unpack about all this, but there's a lot about people of color not feeling welcome into these spaces as well, not just East Indian, Eastern or Indian folks, but it's it's feels like a white women's place too. And so I've seen a lot of really beautiful support too on social media. So social media is not all bad, of really recognizing more teachers of color, and elevating them and giving them more voice time in terms of what they can offer, which has been phenomenal. And I've been able to connect with that and take advantage. So I feel like I'm babbling a little bit, but it's a learning practice, and there's lots of little things that I'm always kind of trying to pay attention to.
No, that's fantastic. I absolutely appreciate the insights that you shared. And I think it's something that, we we have become so accultured to thinking about yoga in a certain way that remembering the spiritual roots, the cultural roots is significant and does tie into the way that we think of a practice and invite it into our daily lives. So I think it's very valuable. The questions that you've posed for us
Yeah.
in thinking about how to be intentional in creating a practice that resonates with us and our sense of purpose, but also is culturally appropriate, not appropriated.
Right.
So
Yeah.
thank you for
Culturally
that.
appreciated too. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah. And
yes.
I get torn about it too, because I feel like sometimes people, especially I think in the Northeast where we're very secular, right? We talk about, if somebody talks about God, you're like, oh, I don't want, I'm not religious. I don't want to talk about it, right? And yoga is not a religion, right? It's very spiritual if you look and really embrace the full lineage, but it doesn't have one particular God or gods. There's Hinduism, which has a lot of mythology, but yoga philosophy is looking to source, and the sort of ultimate assumption is that that source is within you, right?
Mm.
You look at it as a source that's part of something bigger, and that there is some bigger entity, or that it's just in you. And so there's so much of that that's been sort of washed out of yoga, and getting on the mat and doing poses can start to be that experience of connecting the mind and the body together and connecting with your whole self. So I don't want to say, oh, a yoga class that's just about power vinyasa doesn't have value or can't be the doorway in. It's just, how do we as teachers continue to share more beyond that and entice people in a little deeper? Because really, like, the poses are great and you can get a lot out of them, but like the breath work and the meditation and the study of the the way to be in the world and show up and take care of each other and take care of yourself and find liberation and freedom from what we create as our own suffering is so powerful.
The world needs more of that.
Exactly. That's why I also think it's very much tied to social justice. You can't separate it from social justice, because it is about ending suffering.
Mm. Thinking about that, I think the stories that we tell ourselves, maybe
Mhm.
even unconsciously, subconsciously, are
Right.
so important.
Yeah.
What do you what are you telling yourself about your practice, about your business, about what you're sharing with the world through your business?
Yeah.
How do you support your continuation of this practice and mindset in the conversations you have with yourself?
Yeah. That's a great question. And so I would say that my biggest work in my practice right now is working with my perfectionism. That's
Mm.
like so deep and so layered, and I'll feel like, okay, I've kind of let go of that, and then there's just some other way that my sort of really unconscious assumptions about needing to be perfect affect how I show up in the world. And if you do some studying around social justice and white supremacy, perfectionism is one of the key tenets of white supremacy. This idea that there's one way to be, right, and you have to aspire to that, and if you're not, then you're less than, kind of thing. And so it's been a lot about looking at that, and again, yoga for me is a way to sort of look at how my body gives me signals about what's going on, and to create a quiet space to be with what feels really uncomfortable. Whereas, I have still and had a lot of tools in my life that helped me numb myself and avoid that. And so I would say perfectionism. And then really in this last year, another sort of silver lining from COVID is connecting with this idea of how separated I feel like I've grown up feeling from nature. And not like, oh, I never go out in nature, but that even when I'm out in nature, I'm something separate than nature. And in that way, negating the reciprocal relationships we have with trees and plants and bees and flowers and soil and air and water. And so that's been a big part. So I come up with a word every year that I want to just sort of embrace and embody. So reciprocity is my word for this year. And so really wanting to figure out how to embrace more of that in terms of recognizing my stewardship and my connection to nature. So going out on a walk and like touching a tree just feels so much different to me now than it did last year. So, and that feels really powerful and important too.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you said the word connection, because that's what I was hearing that just resonated with me, is that sense of us being all together and one with a part of nature, responding to, interacting with, impacting all of us around, all of it is around us. And
Yeah.
to remember and connect that with a yoga practice, I think is a really beautiful invitation to think about how we show up, the energy that we bring to a space, how it affects those around us, living and not, and to have a sense of responsibility and an ethic of care in the way that we show up in the world, and that to think if we all did that with intention and practice daily, what the impact we might have on our communities and the environment around us. So that's a really nice invitation and reminder. Thank you.
Have you heard of the book Overstory?
No.
Yes, just Laura's nodding. So Overstory is a book that somebody said, oh, you should check this book out. It's a story of the world from the tree's perspective.
Oh, I've heard about this.
Right. And so I listened to it. I tend to be an audiobook listener. And so I listened to it, and it was really powerful. And just, again, sort of recognizing like, we're not the only ones with intelligence, right? The whole world is intelligent.
Am I remembering correctly that this book is about like the canopies communicating and the trees being in a connected sort of grid of communication?
Yeah. And that the sort of proposition that a lot of what happens is influenced by what they're communicating to each other and then trying to communicate to us, and that we're really crappy at listening. So that just like we're not the intelligent species, right? We're just part of a whole intelligent system. And that, I don't know why, but that was a big shift for me in reading that book too.
Fascinating. Thank you. Can you talk, you said that you have a practice now of going outside. Can you talk about what it is that you do, or how you're inviting the outdoors into your daily life and practice?
Yeah. So right now my big thing is to make sure I get up and go outside, or if I can't even go outside, just go stand by a window as the light is changing in the morning. So I call it a morning light bath. And I got turned on to that when I was putting together a workshop on the yoga of sleep, because again, we sort of get out of these cycles because we keep ourselves in light a lot, and we have a lot of light shining on us from these computers that we lose connection with the system, or sorry, the cycles of, night and day and seasons. And so really just going out and being outside. And I've been taking walks in the morning for a long time, but just being more conscious of the idea of like, there's something that there's an intelligence that I'm participating in with this light changing, and I'm in that light changing, and I'm absorbing that. And that's part of how I can function really well. So there's that. And then I've been hugging a lot of trees when I go out for walks in the woods, like just really hugging them and holding on to them. And I feel really silly when I do it, but it feels really good.
I think your reflection about the quality of light and staying connected to that is something that really resonates with me, because this year in particular, I feel really attuned to like the shadows are getting shorter, like the spring is coming, there's hope. But also I notice around me, like we have chickens. The chickens are laying more eggs now. When you bring your awareness to something, you start to see it everywhere
Yeah.
and you see signs of it. So I think inviting those mindfulness practice things where you stand, whether it's standing in the sunshine for your sun bath in the
Yeah.
morning or going outside and connecting with the trees, when you create that space with intention, you find ways to embed it more and more into your life. So
Yeah.
I think it's a wonderful invitation to have that practice and to say, I'm going to go outside, I'm going to be a part of nature.
Yeah.
And then to find more ways to do it just by opening up our minds and our practice to it. Then we'll, if you're hugging the trees, maybe you're noticing the birds, or maybe you're
Yeah.
learning about lichen, or
Yeah.
noticing something different about the ecosystem around you.
Yes.
And so that's a nice reminder and way to invite mindfulness practice into our daily life and
Yeah.
feel connected with our sense of purpose and being and what we're able to share with the world. So
Yeah.
that's nice.
Exactly.
Thank you. That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit? You shared a bit about some of the mentors you've had, some of the community spaces. Are
Mhm.
there challenges that you're dealing with now that the community can support you in addressing, or things that, now as a business owner operating alone, if you had the insights of other people that might help you to take your practice to the next level? Is there any way we can show up for you?
Oh, I would say probably my biggest learning edge is around the financial side of things. So it took me, I think, about a year and a half to actually get QuickBooks. Otherwise, I was just balancing a checkbook, when I started Yoga Grace. And so, but I feel like QuickBook probably has this much potential, and I'm using like this much of the potential. So, getting a little more savvy with that, I think, is something I need to figure out how to dedicate time to. It's not my favorite thing to do, but it's probably something I need to. And then I just find that I have this, and I was talking to you a little bit about it before we started, this wave of like, I can be really great about social media, and I feel like I'm showing up on social media in a way that feels like it's authentic and genuine. And then I just go into this, like, I pull back and my energy sort of goes really inward. And maybe that's okay to sort of come and go, but I feel like there's an expectation to have a presence in terms of building your business and being there. And I know, I've had the coaches that I was telling you I work with, one of them's like, get a calendar and be like, Monday is going to be, a cute little puppy, even if you can't think of something, and Tuesday is going to be a quote. And Wednesday you're going to get on and read a poem, and like make a plan for yourself. And I know it's true that when I've done that, I've actually done it, but I just keep slipping off the wagon. So I don't know. I'm not sure what there is to help me with. Maybe I'm a hopeless cause, but
Well, we're getting comments in the chat that people feel the same way and can totally connect with that sentiment. So I think as you've reflected, you have a coach, a mentor. That's a great starting point. Having someone who can help guide you, and I think finding those accounts that you view, that you value, that feels like it's exciting to you, and then emulating them, or
yeah.
building upon what it is that you enjoy about something, or that speaks to you as an
Mm-hmm.
individual, and then finding ways that you can do that through your own language and your own practice is one way. It's a form of flattery, not to copy them, but to see what it is that they're doing and how they speak
Yeah.
to you as a person, and then to be able to create that for your own work.
Yeah. That's a good
Because
idea.
yeah, you have beautiful work to share, and we have lots to learn from you and through your practice, or through inviting practice in our own lives. So thank you for the opportunity to connect with you virtually
Mhm.
through social media. And I know I'll be looking for your posts and cheering and sharing and liking them.
Thanks.
It's also so real that technology is changing all the time, and it's really hard to keep up with what the algorithm is doing, or with the best practice. And so having others to guide you and say like, oh, have you tried a reel yet? Or what do you think about doing something live? It terrifies most people.
Mhm.
But you're already doing classes live, so you're probably already a pro at creating that online presence. So I'm sure we'll be a warm audience to your posts if and when you choose
Thank
to
you.
share them with us. Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely.
It's just, I feel like it's more, I feel like I can be pretty creative, but it feels like just sometimes it's like I need that constant energy that I lose, that I can't kind of keep, on that wheel.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the other thing is that we're doing so much and we're creating
Yeah.
these expectations of constant creation that it can feel unmanageable to achieve it all. My other suggestion is to leverage what you're already doing. You have a beautiful practice or you have an outdoor walk. How can you use a minute of that or a reflection that you have come come to in your practice and just share just a bit of what you're doing so that people are invited in to learn more about you and connect more with the ideas that you're also thinking about. So
Yeah,
um,
that's a good idea.
I'm all about leveraging the work you're already doing because we
Yeah,
don't no one has time extra time.
we do not, do we?
Jen, it has been so lovely to hear your story, to connect with you, the insights that you share about yoga and social justice and mindfulness practice and being connected with nature is just so valuable, I think, especially in this time when we are, as a culture, really dealing with deep-seated challenges, and also as a nation dealing with COVID and connecting virtually and being hungry for an interpersonal connection, but not necessarily feeling it in the computer setting. So
Yeah.
to create those spaces where we're showing up for ourselves in our practice, but also going out into the world, into the woods, into the grass, into the snow,
Mhm.
and finding that resonance and connection with things outside of our being, I think is really timely and powerful. Thank you.
Thanks. Well, thanks for having me. It was fun.
Yeah, absolutely. We have time for questions if folks have them. In the chat, Laura said, I had this experience with namaste as well. In India, we said it all the time, and it just meant hello and goodbye. Here they say it, and it means light. The light in me honors the light in you, which is beautiful, but I don't think that is really how they think of it in India.
Yes, I think that that's true for sure. Yeah. And I know, I mean, I think some people from India don't care when they hear it sort of expressed the other way, but I think some do. That's my
Mm.
understanding. So I just have stopped using it in classes. I don't tell anybody in class to not use it, but I I say at the end of class, Shubha Mastu, which means I wish you many good things.
Mm.
So that's what I do instead.
Wow. Well, that feels like a lovely, lovely reflection for our our time together.
Yeah.
Um, I just want to thank you for sharing the space and sharing your story, and I look forward to following your story more on social media and connecting with you. Jen is leading a workshop next week on Tuesday at noon. We'll be doing a workshop on yoga for the tech neck, unlocking your potential. We've all been on computers for so long. And so
Yeah.
thinking about ways that we can use our body with intention and feel better connected and use mobility to serve us better. Jen, is there anything more you'd want to share about that workshop or accessibility questions folks might have about that
Sure,
workshop?
sure. Yeah, so it'll be, I would definitely want to offer some really simple movement practices that can be helpful and share a couple adaptations. So depending on what your range of motion is, what you can do. And then also just talking about, a couple other quick things that folks can do. So I'm hoping to offer really simple, accessible things that people can try and not like you have to plan out a whole hour to get rid of your tech neck to be able to survive. So
little adjustments, iterative change.
yes.
I like that. That's great. Thank you. And then next Thursday, the 25th, we have a workshop with Farine Paris-Meyer of All Heart Inspiration. She's going to be leading a workshop on telling your story. She's a fantastic storyteller, and I'm really excited to engage her talents in this community. So definitely sign up for that one if you're able to join us. I'm excited to hear her present for us and hear what everyone in the community discovers about themselves and their story. I think, as we shared a little bit here, the stories that we tell ourselves are so powerful in the way that we show up in the world and the way we connect with other people. And so inviting intention in how we cultivate for ourselves that sense of purpose, that the resonance with other people, and how we can show up for each other in the ways that we share our stories, I think is really powerful. So thank you so much for joining us today. It is an honor and a privilege to connect with you. Jen, thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you.
I look forward to collaborating more with you in our Pivot and Thrive community and helping to share your talents with our community and beyond.
Thanks for bringing us together, Karen.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.